Okay, so last night we started with verse 12, and there we were talking about the fortitude of willingly accepting suffering. In other words, to make our mind strong, to develop a courageous mind that can bear difficulties. And we were talking last night that if we don't develop a strong mind that can bear difficulties, then even the slightest little situation can happen and we completely fall apart and we can't bear it. And also, if we don't develop fortitude and a mind that's able to bear difficulties, then when we get sick, we may have the physical suffering of sickness, but then we add on top of that the mental suffering of not accepting this sickness and getting mad because we're sick and everything like that. And how when that happens, then, we're kind of in double trouble, because very often the physical suffering may not be so bad, but when our mind makes a big deal out of it, then everything becomes bad. Yeah. Or even, the mental suffering may not be so bad, but when we get mad at it and we feel we don't deserve it and we don't like it and like this, that it's unfair, then the more we get agitated, the more unhappy we are, even though the original suffering was actually quite small. So this is very interesting to watch, because it becomes very clear that suffering really originates in our mind. That yes, true, that sometimes we may have a suffering feeling from our body, but the real extreme suffering so often comes from our mind that doesn't accept the situation, that rejects the situation. And this becomes really evident as we look at our own experience. Yeah. So we'll continue on tonight. We had gotten through verse 16. We'll start with verse 17 tonight. So it says, "Some, when they see their own blood, become especially brave and steady. But some, when they see the blood of others, faint and fall unconscious." So here they're talking about soldiers, not Dharma practitioners. Okay? But some soldiers, even when they're injured themselves, instead of getting discouraged or weak or anything, their injury makes them even more determined, to win the battle. Other people, they're okay themselves, but they see somebody else bleeding and they faint. They can't endure it. Okay? So here's two different situations. Yeah. So what it's showing is that it's not really the situation that is important. It's how we react to the situation. Okay, the next verse explains it. Verse 18 says, "These reactions come from the mind, being either steady or timid. Therefore, I should disregard harms caused to me and not be affected by suffering." Okay, so these reactions come from the mind being either steady or timid. So in the case of somebody who has injured themselves but becomes even more determined, their mind is steady, and that's why even, their own injury is not a big deal to them. They can continue on fighting whatever, war they're fighting. But somebody else whose mind is very timid, they see somebody else's blood and they just go, I can't stand it. Okay? So it's so evident that this is really the difference between these two people is not a difference in the external situation, it's a difference in the reaction of their minds. So what that shows is that it's not the external situation that makes us brave or timid. it's our own mind that makes us brave or timid. Okay, do you see that? It's a very important point here. Yeah, because it's not coming from outside, it's coming from inside. Okay, so verse 19 says, even when the wise are suffering, their minds remain very lucid and undefiled. For when war is being waged against the disturbing conceptions, much harm is caused at the time of battle. Okay, so if we link that up with the last two lines of verse 18, which says, therefore I should disregard harms caused to me and not be affected by suffering. Okay, those two lines are saying, since courage and timidity depend on our mind, not on the situation, let's not make a big deal about the suffering situation, and let's keep our own mind steady. Let's not let our own mind be adversely affected by suffering, because we don't need to let it be adversely affected. Okay? So this is something very interesting to think about, isn't it? When just a little bit of suffering comes and we just completely fall apart. Why? Why? We have a choice about how to respond. And when the wise are suffering, their minds remain very lucid and undefiled. So people who are very wise, even they face a suffering situation, their minds are calm, their minds are clear, they don't get totally freaked out and overwhelmed with anger or fear. And so having that calm, clear, steady mind gives you so much freedom. Whereas when we let our mind get overwhelmed by fear or anger, then we have very little freedom. Our mind is under the control of afflictions and becomes very, very unhappy. Yeah, it's true, isn't it? Yeah, if we go to the doctor and we get a diagnosis that we don't like to hear, we can either completely flip out and go nuts, or we can remain calm and clear and continue to make our life beneficial. I had one friend, she told me the story that she had a lot of symptoms and she went to the doctor, and the doctor diagnosed her with some very severe illness. I don't know which one it was, but something quite severe that might even be terminal. And at first she was completely freaked out, like, because she was in her early 30s and she thought, I'm going to be sick for the rest of my life and I'm going to die young and I'm going to be in so much pain. And, her mind just made up all these stories and she completely freaked out. And then she told me that at a certain point she thought, well, what would the Dalai Lama do if he had this kind of diagnosis? How would the Dalai Lama respond? And she said that the words came to her, just be kind. And so she thought, well, yeah, that's what the Dalai Lama would do, is he would just be kind. So she made the determination that no matter what happened, when she was in the hospital or getting tests or treatments, she would just be kind and treat the doctors well and the nurses and the technicians and her family and everybody she came into contact with kindness. And she said that completely changed her mental attitude. Yeah? Instead of being totally overwhelmed by suffering and confused and afraid, she just knew what she was going to do, and she was going to be kind. And as it actually turned out, the doctor had misdiagnosed her disease, and she didn't have a terrible disease. And she recovered. So it's interesting, isn't it? So it really shows that it all depends on our mind. which means we have a choice. Yeah. So it could be a situation of physical suffering, or last night even I gave the example of mental suffering. A friend of ours who, betrays our trust or doesn't treat us properly, and we can either totally fall apart and feel sorry for ourselves, or we can just say, what am I going to do? Just be kind. And I'm going to get through this, and I'm going to come out the other end and be stronger and develop internal resources that I didn't even know that I had. And this situation doesn't need to completely overwhelm my life and make me incapacitated. Yeah? So it all depends on the mind. I've read stories of people who were imprisoned either in Tibet or in China during the Cultural Revolution, and things were so severe in China at that time. People, kind of coming out against their parents, against their teachers, turning people into the police. It was completely chaotic at that time, and many people who were totally innocent wound up in prison. And in reading the stories of many of these people, what it shows is that the people who survived the unfair imprisonment had very strong, clear minds. And the people that around them who often died when they were in prison were the people who freaked out and just said, So it really shows how much it comes from the mind and how important it is to train our mind. And so, like the verses said yesterday, we start with small sufferings and we practice getting used to small sufferings. And through doing that, gradually, we become more and more able to endure greater and greater sufferings. Okay? And the last two lines of verse 19, for when war is being waged against the disturbing conceptions, in other words, against our mental afflictions, much harm is caused at the time of battle. So as a Buddhist practitioner, our war, in quotes, our battle, is against ignorance, anger, and attachment. Okay? We've seen that our real enemy is these three poisonous attitudes, plus it's general, it's, other generals like pride and conceit and spite and vengeance and jealousy. And then the big four-star general of the self-centered thought. And so a Dharma practitioner sees that these mental attitudes, these disturbing emotions, are the real enemy. And so when we're in, quote, quote, battle against the enemy, trying to work with our mind, sometimes it can be really difficult. Yeah? Because we may, for example, there gets to be a certain point in your Dharma practice where you've heard enough teachings that it's really imprinted in your mind that anger is a defilement and that it creates negativity, and that when we're angry, we're exaggerating the situation. So at a certain point, that really sinks into our mind. So after that, every time we get angry, one part of our mind may be saying, it's his fault, he made me mad, this and this and this. But another part of our mind is saying, anger is a defilement that comes from inside me. It's not the other person's fault. I can't blame the other person. I have to work with my own anger. Okay, so there comes a point in our practice where we can't continue blaming others, where we really start to take responsibility for our own emotions. And at that point, when we're trying to apply the Dharma antidotes, for example, to anger, because our mind is still not tamed, that other part of our mind says, no, it really is his fault. And then we meditate a little bit on patience, and no, it's due to my karma. My negative karma is ripening. I created a negative action in the past due to my self-centeredness. There's no reason to blame somebody else. And then the other mind comes in us and, oh, but I can't stand his guts, And then we go back and forth like this between a Dharma understanding and our reactive anger. Yeah, have you ever had that experience when you've been trying to practice the Dharma? Yeah, it's like internal civil war. Yeah, so that's what that verse is talking about, that when we're really trying to practice, it's, our virtuous side is really in combat against the disturbing attitudes. And we have to remain firm and clear. Because if every time, we're trying to overcome our anger, and then anger just fights back, and then we just go, well, okay, forget it, and then we, support our anger, then we're going to be totally lost. We're going to just develop more and more negative qualities. Yeah, we won't develop any strength inside. I was, 2 weekends ago, I was in Indonesia leading a retreat. And there was one young nun who told me one day that on the second day of the retreat, she told me that it had been really hard for her. The retreat had been because she hadn't been used to the style of meditation we were doing. And also, because of the translator, different things happening. And so she said that her mind just would get really agitated and really angry. And, I've had that happen too. Just kind of the negative, selfish mind just flares up in the middle of a Dharma setting, and it's like, so she told me she was just like that, in such a bad mood and so much suffering. And she said that morning in meditation, she just wanted, because we were doing group meditation, she just wanted to stand up and walk out. And then she said, but I can't, I'm a nun. I want to set a good example for the lay people. I can't do that. So she said she just sat there, and her mantra became, I won't give up. I won't give up. I'm not going to give up. And she just kept saying that to herself, sitting there, I'm not going to give up. I'm not going to let this bad mood, this anger overwhelm me and make me walk out. I'm going to endure this. And she did. And at the end of the session, when the bell rang, then it's all gone, it's all over. But she realized that she had a lot of inner strength to go through that difficulty. And she was very glad that she just sat there and really told herself, I'm not going to give up. I'm not going to give up. Okay? So when we're trying to, subdue our selfish mind or our attachment or our jealousy or something like that, sometimes, our selfish mind really fights back. But we have to go through that and not give in. Okay? So that's, this is developing the fortitude to endure suffering. And you know what? Wherever we go in our life, we're going to have suffering. Suffering's going to follow us, isn't it? I remember one situation. I was at a retreat with one of my teachers, and I forget exactly what happened, But there was another nun there who was very outspoken. And apparently I said something to our teacher, or I asked a question or something that made her really mad. So as we were walking back to our rooms at the retreat center, in the break time, during the teachings, she came up to me and she said, "Why did you ask that question? Why did you say that? That doesn't make any sense." She's going on and on about, you shouldn't talk like that, on and on and on and on. And then, so I'm starting to get angry here, because I just said something really quite innocuous to my teacher. I just, voiced an opinion and that was it. Boy, but she was mad about it. So then the teaching resumed, and then after the teaching, I was walking back to my room, and I was thinking about what she said to me. And you know how when you go over and over in your mind what somebody said, then you get madder and madder? Yeah. I mean, at the beginning, the anger's this big, but then you sit and think about it, and then your mind makes the anger like, it's just this situation is humongous. And I was furious. And then the thought came to my mind, if I remain angry, I'm not going to sleep tonight. Yeah. And my teacher didn't give us very many hours to sleep, so every minute was precious. And I thought, I don't want to stay awake all night being angry about this. I have to give up the anger, for my own benefit so I can get some rest tonight. And then it also hit me that, no matter where I go, there's going to be people who disagree with my ideas. And wherever I go, there's going to be people who blame me, like this person blamed me for something that I thought was very stupid. So wherever I go, this is going to happen, so I better get used to it. Because it's true. Sometimes, even you just walk out of one situation, then you meet the same situation again. Yeah. So to develop some ability to endure this kind of suffering. But it also emphasized to me how important it is not to ruminate about the situation and think again and again and again about what the person said to me. Because the more I do that, the more miserable I become. The person said something to me one time, but I think about it again and again, so I do it to myself many times. So actually, I should get mad at myself, because I'm making myself miserable, not the other person. Okay. Then verse 20 says, the victorious warriors are those who, having disregarded all suffering, vanquish the foes of hatred and so forth. Common warriors slay only corpses. Now, what does this mean? Okay, the victorious warriors, like the Bodhisattvas, the Buddhas, they, having disregarded all suffering, in other words, having developed fortitude so that they're not overwhelmed by suffering, they're actually able to vanquish, to conquer the foes of anger and attachment and self-centeredness and confusion. Yeah, so those people who are strong in their spiritual practice, they overcome the real causes of our misery, which are the defilements in our mind. If we overcome those defilements, then no matter where we are and what happens to us, we can be happy, we can be peaceful. So those are the real heroes. But then I find it very interesting. Common warriors slay only corpses. So you get, all of our countries, they all have a military, right? I mean, you all go to NS, and all the guys do. And you're going there and you're going to defend the country and you learn how to shoot and how to kill and how to do all these things. And what Shantideva is saying is all those warriors who fight physical battles, they're killing only corpses. Now you might say, no, they're not. They're killing real people. They're killing the enemy that's trying to harm me. But Shantideva says in response to that, another living being, first of all, isn't your real enemy. Your real enemy is the ignorance, anger, and attachment and selfishness inside. And second of all, that other person at some time or another is going to die. Yeah? So he's like a corpse, because he's going to die at some time. You're just making him die a little bit earlier. What's so special about killing somebody who's going to die anyway? You know, Shantideva says all those heroes who think, oh, I'm the brave Marine, I'm the brave, this and that. They're just killing people who are going to die anyway. Yeah? So they're killing corpses. Whereas, and also the people they're killing aren't real enemies. The real enemy is inside. Yeah? I remember one time watching one of my teachers walk down the aisle, to the teaching seat. And he's a very small person. And, he was walking just very humbly. And I was thinking, he's so small, he's so humble, but he's really strong inside. Completely cannot be conquered inside because he's conquered the defilements. He's conquered the self-centeredness. Whereas you get some big, brave, kind of macho guy, yeah, who just, some small suffering comes and completely falls apart. Yeah? Or even they're brave in battle, they come home and they have some problem and they can't deal with their problem at all. So it really made me think, I have to redefine what courage means. And courage doesn't mean having a strong body, it means having a strong mind. Yeah. That was nice, because I'm kind of small and in some kind of physical thing, I'm not going to win. But, if you can have a strong mind, then you can handle the situation. Okay, verse 21. Furthermore, suffering has good qualities. You're going to say, what in the world is he talking about? Suffering has good qualities. Well, keep listening. Through being disheartened with it, arrogance is dispelled. Compassion arises for those in cyclic existence. Negativity is shunned, and joy is found in virtue. So what he's saying is, even when we experience suffering, there's some good that can come from it if we know how to think, if we know how to train our mind. Some good can come from suffering. So, what good can come from suffering? When we are disenchanted with suffering, when we are disenchanted with the dukkha or unsatisfactory nature of cyclic existence, then our arrogance is dispelled. Somebody might be quite arrogant. I'm the best, I'm this, I'm that, I'm so powerful, you listen to me. But when that person gets sick, are they arrogant then? Yeah. Some people who are really arrogant when they're well, when they're sick, they become like little children. Yeah, don't they? They become frightened, they're nervous, they want comfort. So at that point, the arrogance is gone. So in the same way with us, yeah, when we face suffering, if we know how to think properly, we can use it to conquer our arrogance. Yeah. When we're sick, then we say, what am I so proud about? Or when we face the suffering of having financial trouble, then we say, why am I so arrogant? Or maybe we face the suffering of, we got laid off of our job or somebody criticized us. Then we go, how can I be so arrogant? I can't. I'm just an ordinary person. So when our arrogance is dispelled, that's actually very good. Yeah, because arrogance is a very unpleasant state of mind. And nobody likes arrogant people. People may be afraid of somebody who's arrogant and conceited, but they definitely don't like them. Okay? And then also through arrogance, we create so much negative karma. So if, a suffering situation happens and we're humiliated, then we have to release all that arrogance, and so we stop creating that particular kind of negative karma. So we can say to ourselves, that's good. That's good. So the same thing actually when our reputation is ruined. I was telling people this at the retreat we had over the weekend. Because we all hate for our reputation to be ruined. We want to have a good reputation. We want people to think well of us. Yeah, and we completely get so nervous when we think of people talking behind our back or spreading lies and rumors about us or saying nasty things. But I know for myself, when I've had that happen, if I just stop and then switch the situation and tell my mind, oh, it's good my reputation's getting ruined. Yeah, it's really good all these people are talking about, saying terrible things about me behind my back. This is good, because now I can't be arrogant. I can't walk around like I'm a little princess here that everybody should love and respect and think highly of. It's good for me to learn to be a little bit humble and not so proud. Yeah? So it's very interesting, because when I say this to myself and really think it, then my mind becomes okay. I stop being so angry and distressed about having a bad reputation. Because I say, actually, this is good for my Dharma practice. It's going to make me humbler. It's good for my practice. I won't create so much negative karma in the future. Okay? Do you see the reasoning behind that? Do you think you could say, oh good, my reputation is getting ruined? Do you think you could say that to yourself? It's hard, isn't it, to even think about it. You want to say, no, I'm a good person, that person's lying about me, they're the one who did this and this and this and this, I didn't do anything, you've got to like me because I'm a wonderful person. Boy, somebody like that really has ego problems, right? So then we can say, oh good, that ego mind is getting beaten up. That ego mind that's my enemy, yeah, it can't go on doing things like that. I just have to, endure this bad reputation, that's all. So it's actually possible. It's actually possible. Okay, so that's one advantage of suffering. Second is compassion arises for those in cyclic existence. So when we suffer, when we have pain, then when we think of other living beings who face the same situation or even a worse situation, then we really have compassion. You know, sometimes before we've been in a difficult situation, we look at people in that situation and we say, oh, why are they acting like that? Just get over it, stop complaining. But then when we're in that situation, then we understand what it's like, and then we can really be compassionate for somebody. So that's good, isn't it? Yeah? If our suffering, our pain makes us more compassionate towards other people, then it's valuable. And we can see, because, you know, sometimes when we're well, when we're healthy, when everything's going well in our life, we don't have much compassion for anybody. Yeah, what do you think? Are you like that sometimes? You know, when things are going good in your life, when a friend comes to tell you their problem, you go, stop complaining. I've heard that story 15 times already. Yeah. Or when you're well, you know, then maybe an older relative gets sick or their arthritis bothers them or something like that. And you go, oh, my aunt, my uncle, they just complain all the time about their health. Why don't they stop complaining? But then, you know, when we get sick, then we understand that's what it's like when you don't feel well. That's what it's like when your body doesn't work. That's what it's like when you have a certain kind of mental pain or relationship problem or, you know, different kind of mental things. So our compassion really increases. So that's another good quality of suffering. So it makes us more compassionate if we really practice the Dharma. If we don't practice the Dharma, then we just sit there and cry and complain and whine and blame and are totally miserable. But if we really practice, we can transform that suffering situation. Okay? So suffering destroys our arrogance. Suffering makes us more compassionate. Negativity is shunned. Okay? When we suffer, when we have pain, when we have the Buddhist worldview, then we realize, why do I have pain? It's because of my own negative actions. Yeah. In other words, I'm responsible for this pain. I created the cause. And if I don't like having painful results, then I need to stop creating the cause, and I need to really improve my ethical conduct. And so we shun negativity. Okay? So when we suffer and we really think about the kinds of actions we could have done that, you know, would have brought that suffering to us, you know, the kind of karma we must have created, then we say, oh, I have to change my behavior. Yeah? Why are all these people teasing me and making fun of me? Well, it's because I teased and made fun of other people in the past, maybe previous lives. So I've got to really stop that. And when I see people, you know, who are suffering, instead of making fun of them or criticizing them or being rude to them, I've got to reach, open my eyes and reach out to them with my heart and reach out to them with my hand and help them. Okay? So the pain can make us really stop our negative actions. It's another good quality of pain, isn't it? Yeah? You know, for example, if we have a really good friend who then lies to us or does something else that betrays our trust, if we say, this is due to my own negative actions in a previous life, I've betrayed others' trust or I've lied to others, so now I need to really think about, how can I be a good friend to other people? How can I be reliable? How can I carry out the promises I've made to other people so that I don't betray their trust? Because when I betray their trust, I meet situations in which other people betray my trust. Okay? If I really put some energy into being a good friend to other people and keeping my own promises and commitments, then I'll meet totally different kind of people in the future, and I'll have much better relationships, and other people won't betray my trust. Okay, so we learn to give up those negative actions. That's useful, isn't it? It's a benefit that can be derived from suffering. And then the last one, it says, joy is found in virtue. So we may shun negativity, but then we also, the suffering makes us think about karma more. So then we want to create more positive karma. And then, we find real joy in creating virtue because we know that it will bring good results in the future. Just as our negative karma brings bad results, if we create positive karma, it will bring good results. So then we have a joyful mind that really wants to engage in our Dharma practice. And wants to keep good ethical conduct, wants to be generous, wants to be reliable. Okay? So it really increases our own virtuous qualities and helps us take joy in virtue. Okay? So these are some of the benefits that can be derived from suffering. So it's very important to think about this, and when you go home, to meditate on these kinds of things. Don't just, kind of listen to the talk tonight and then go home and forget everything. But go home and really think about this and make examples from your own life and contemplate the meaning. And then see if through your contemplation, your arrogance decreases, your compassion increases, you have a stronger resolve not to engage in non-virtue, and you have more delight and joy in engaging in virtue. See if through thinking about these things in this way, you can actually transform your mind. Okay? That's the real Dharma practice. That's really benefiting from the Buddhist teaching, is when we can transform our mind from a negative state, a non-virtuous state, into a virtuous state. So this is what we practice doing in our daily meditations. Because if we practice it in our daily meditations, then we get some habit, we get some familiarity with these different ways of thinking. And then, like Shantideva told us last night, there's nothing that doesn't become easier with familiarity. So as we contemplate these techniques, they become easier. Our mind becomes more convinced. It's easier to adopt a different view and to handle situations that previously were very, very difficult. Sometimes when I have difficulties with people and my mind wants to go, why are they treating me like this? They don't appreciate me. they're not being respectful, they blah, 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 you know, then I think of how other people treat my teachers. Now you would think, yeah, that people would treat Buddhist teachers really well. Yeah. Some people think, oh, I want to practice Dharma, then I can be a teacher, then everybody will treat me really well. Forget it. Forget it, really forget it. Because sometimes when you're trying to help people, you're trying to teach people, yeah, they blame you for all their internal confusion. Yeah. Why are you telling me to generate compassion? I don't want to be compassionate. You're bossing me around. They say all sorts of amazing things. Okay? So when I have difficulties with people, I think of my own teachers. And even though my own teachers, from their side, completely compassionate, sometimes the disciples act outrageously. Yeah? And then I watch how my teachers handle those situations. And they don't get angry, they don't get upset, they keep that calm mind. And then that becomes a good example for me. That, you know, how come my teachers are able to bear those difficulties when their own disciples act in a very obnoxious way? Well, it's because they're practicing exactly what they're teaching me. So I need to really listen to those teachings and put them into practice. And if I do, then when I have, you know, people treat me in a way I don't like, my mind also will be able to remain calm and peaceful. Okay? So you can sometimes look to other people for inspiration. Yeah. Do you remember when you were a kid, you know, who were your idols when you were kids? Who were your role models? Who did you look up to when you were a kid? You know? Was it a movie star or a sports hero or a war hero or, you know, who did we admire? Who were our role models as kids? Yeah? Because when somebody is a role model, then when we run into difficulty, we look at that person and how do they deal with those situations, and we learn from it. Yeah. You know who I really admired when I was a little kid? I don't know how old I was, but at some point when I was young, I read the story of Helen Keller. Yeah? She was a little girl who was blind and who was deaf, and then her tutor taught her, you know, sign language and Braille and everything, and she learned to communicate. And before that, she was just like a wild animal, but due to her tutor's kindness, she really became a great person. And after I read her story, I thought, wow, that's so amazing. She had so many difficulties, so many adversities, being born blind and deaf, and yet she really overcame them. And I thought about her tutor, Annie Sullivan, and how great she was to have the fortitude and the patience to stay and teach this little girl who was blind and deaf and totally out of control. Yeah. So that really made quite a big impression upon me when I was little. You know, it's like, oh, these people have some kind of special quality. Yeah, I want to be able to be like them, even though I'm not blind and deaf, okay? But I want to be able to, you know, to conquer adversity and to not give up, like you know, they were able to do. Okay. So with verse 22, we're moving into a different outline. Verse 12 through 21 was talking about the fortitude of enduring suffering. With verse 22, we begin thinking about the fortitude of definitely thinking about the Dharma. Okay? So what this means, the fortitude of definitely thinking about the Dharma, is that we really start thinking about emptiness and dependent arising and conditionality, because that's the meaning of Dharma in this situation is truth or reality. So the fortitude of thinking about reality. Because sometimes thinking about reality can be a little bit unnerving because it's the total opposite of our ignorant view. So we need a lot of courage, a lot of fortitude to overcome our ignorance and to really understand dependent arising and conditionality on one hand, and the fact that things do not exist under their own power with their own essential nature on the other hand, and how these two things go together. Yeah, it takes a lot of fortitude to really understand this and consistently think about it. So we're going to start developing that fortitude with verse 22. Okay, so verse 22 says, "As I do not become angry with great sources of suffering such as jaundice, then why be angry with animate creatures? They too are provoked by conditions." Okay, so take a situation when you get sick with jaundice or hepatitis. Have any of you ever had hepatitis? I got hepatitis when I was in Nepal many years ago. You're miserable. But you know, when we get a disease, do we get mad at the disease? Not really, you know, because the disease is an inanimate thing, and we realize that it came about just due to its own causes and conditions. So, you know, why did I get hepatitis? I ate food that wasn't washed properly. I don't get mad at that food. Yeah, I don't get mad at the germs. I don't get mad at my liver. Okay, so things like this that are inanimate, we usually don't get mad at because we realize that, you know, they are the way they are just because of conditions, the conditions that cause them. Then Shantideva says, then why be angry at animate creatures? They too are provoked by conditions. Okay, so we don't get mad at inanimate things so much, but at an animate living being, at a sentient being, we get really mad, don't we? But Shantideva says, why do you get mad at another person? Because that person was just caused by conditions in the same way that the disease was caused by conditions. Yeah, both of them are brought about by conditions. Why do you get mad at one and you don't get mad at the other? You getting what I'm saying? Yeah. So it's an interesting thing to think about when he says, why too be angry with animate creatures? They too are provoked by conditions. So when another living being does something that we don't like, they do it simply because of conditions. You know, certain conditions arose. Some are external conditions, some may be internal conditions that made them act in a certain way. Okay, so he goes on here in verse 23. Although they are not wished for, these sicknesses arise. And likewise, although they are not wished for, these disturbing conceptions or afflictions forcibly arise. Okay, so a sickness, isn't wished for, but due to conditions, we get sick. Yeah, when you get a cold, you don't blame the cold. Yeah, you just realize there were conditions that came together that you got sick. Okay. Likewise, our afflictions, when they arise, or the afflictions in other people, when they arise, they didn't have the thought, oh, I'm going to arise and make somebody miserable. They arose just due to conditions. Okay, so let's look at this again. We don't get mad at the disease, but we get mad at the person. But it doesn't make sense to get mad at the person, because the person is provoked by conditions, and their primary condition that is making them do what they're doing, that we don't like, is their own mental afflictions, or their own unhappy mind. Okay. And these mental afflictions also don't think, I'm going to arise in somebody's mind. They just, when the conditions are there, they come. Look at your own anger. Yeah? Do you think beforehand, oh, I'm going to deliberately get angry? No, you don't. But when conditions come together that provoke your anger, the anger comes up. Yeah? In the same way, we don't say, oh, I'm going to deliberately be greedy. But rather, when the conditions are there, then greed arises, or attachment arises in our mind. So just as a disease, a sickness, is caused by its causes and conditions, so too people's behavior that we don't like is due to causes and conditions, primarily their own afflictions, but their afflictions also come about due to causes and conditions. Okay, so if both a sickness and harm from somebody else, if both of them are due to causes and conditions, it doesn't make sense to get mad at either one of them. Because neither one of them thought, I want to cause harm. It's just causes and conditions came together. Then an attitude, an emotion arises in somebody's mind, and they act it out. Mm-hmm. So if you think about it, it's not that people sit there and, say, I want to get angry, I want to be spiteful, I want to, be full of rage, I want to hold a grudge. Nobody thinks I want to have a negative emotion. Yeah. But rather, due to causes and conditions, these negative emotions come, and they motivate people to do the actions that we don't like. Yeah. So why get mad at the people? They're under the power of their afflictions, and their afflictions are under the power of other causes and conditions. Yeah. This is a pretty interesting argument, isn't it? We've probably never thought about it before, but there's something to it. Verse 24 says, without thinking I shall be angry, people become angry with no resistance. It's true, isn't it? Yeah? Just as we don't think I'm going to get angry, but anger just goes boom, so too other people. Yeah? People don't think, oh, I want to get deliberately jealous. Yeah, they don't think that. But causes and conditions come, pooh, the mind explodes in jealousy. True. Okay? And without thinking, I shall produce myself. Likewise, anger itself is produced. Okay? So just as people don't think I shall become angry, but causes and conditions make them angry, also the anger itself doesn't think I will arise, but causes and conditions make the anger arise. Okay? All mistakes that occur and all the various kinds of wrongdoing arise from the force of conditions. They do not govern themselves. This is something so profound. If we really understood this verse very deeply, we would never ever get angry again. Because we would really see that all mistakes that occurs, all negative actions, all the things that people do that hurt us, that betray our trust, that all these things have no intentions themselves to arise and cause harm, but rather, due to causes and conditions, these negative emotions arise in other people and then they do things that harm us. In a similar way, our own angry response or our own pain, our own hurt, hurt doesn't say, I think I'll arise. Hurt just comes due to causes and conditions. Okay? So what it's showing is that none of these things exist under their own power. None of these things govern themselves. They're all under the power of causes and conditions. Okay? And then the next verse says, these conditions that assemble together have no intention to produce anything, and neither does their product have the intention to be produced. So the causes and conditions that come together that make somebody angry, those causes and conditions don't have the intention to come together and produce anger in somebody. The anger doesn't have the intention to be produced. The person who experiences the anger didn't think, I want anger to arise in me right now. Yeah? So none of this happens with, self-governed intention. It just happens due to causes and conditions. When we really think about that deeply, then the way we see other people changes. And instead of seeing people as, they're wrong, they're bad, they're doing something nasty, instead what we see is just this play of causes and conditions. It's like a dance of causes and conditions. Yeah? And just as when you have a big dance, there's all sorts of players, So when we have causes and conditions, there's all sorts of causes and conditions that come, that we didn't even know about, that enter the picture and influence what we experience. Yeah? But there's no need to get mad at any of them, or to get mad at the person who's under the influence of causes and conditions. Okay. So we'll pause the teaching for here tonight. We'll continue tomorrow. Shall I go through some questions that we still have from last night? And then if you have any questions about tonight, you can write them down, and then you can leave them up here on the table, and then I'll respond to them tomorrow night. Let's see here. Okay. You know, the older generation folks don't allow ladies into temples when they have their period. Kindly enlighten us on this topic. That is old-fashioned superstition. Okay, there's no reason why a woman shouldn't be able to go into a temple when she has her period. You know, having your period is not dirty, it's not sinful, it doesn't make you contaminated. It's a completely natural function of a body. Yeah, so women should be able to go into temples. Okay, so if you and another person are chronically angry at each other, and you both have created negative karma in the relationship, how much of this anger and negative karma can be reduced by talking with them, apologizing, forgiving, and so on, versus doing one's own Dharma practice? I think in a relationship where, like this, where both parties have been angry, both parties have created negative karma, that you need to do both things. On one hand, we need to work with our own mind. We need to work with our own mind and develop some calmness, process. If we were hurt, process the hurt. If we had unrealistic expectations, let go of those unrealistic expectations. So I think on one hand, we need to work on it in our own Dharma practice. But that's not sufficient. If we really want to remedy the relationship, then when we have more insight into our own behavior and our own feelings, then we need to approach the other person and say, I would like to talk with you about this because I would like to have a good relationship with you. And then if there's things that you feel you want to apologize for, you apologize for those things, you know, and hopefully through doing your meditation practice, you've been able to forgive that person for some of the things they've done. Okay? So then it's possible, actually, through talking to the person too, to reduce a lot of that negativity and reconcile. But both people have to be willing to give up their ego in order to reconcile. We can't stay entrenched in our negative opinions and our self-righteousness and at the same time reconcile with somebody. I had a friend who was in couples therapy. She was seeing a counselor with her husband. It was very much this situation, you know. Both people were angry, both had created negativity. And at one point in the discussing with the counselor, her husband was, you know, just getting really, you know, like this, you know, this, I just don't like this behavior, and, you know, I just can't stand when you do this. And the counselor looked at him and said, do you want to be right, or do you want to have a good relationship with her? Stopped him dead in his tracks, because he realized he couldn't be both right and hold on to his opinionatedness and his anger and his wanting to have the last word, and also reconcile with his wife. You know, because some people, they want to be right by all means. You know, I am going to be right. Even if I'm wrong, I'm going to fight and prove I'm right. I'm going to have the last word. Well, that's fine. You can do that all you want, but you're not going to have a good relationship with the person. You have a choice. You can be right, or you can reconcile. Yeah? You can win, or you can reconcile. If you really value the relationship and you want to reconcile, you have to give up some of this, but I'm the right one and I'm the this and that. You have to give that up. Okay, let's see. Can we still have fun while practicing the Dharma? Yes, of course. Why not? Yeah, actually you can have more fun when you practice the Dharma because anger doesn't get in the way and attachment doesn't get in the way and jealousy doesn't get in the way. You can actually enjoy things much more when you practice the Dharma. Don't think that practicing Dharma means, oh, I'm serious all the time because I've always got to be virtuous. That's not what Dharma practice is like. Of course you can have fun and you should be joyful, you should be happy. You may not have fun in the same old ways. You may not have fun going out to party and getting drunk, but you can still have fun. Who is my greatest enemy and why? What is the cause and how to overcome? Okay, greatest enemy is our ignorance, okay, that completely misapprehends how we exist and how phenomena exist. And another great enemy is our own self-centered mind, the selfish mind that says, I'm more important than anybody else. We overcome the ignorance by generating wisdom, and we do that through studying the teachings on the nature of reality, thinking about those teachings and meditating on them. We overcome the self-centered mind by generating love, compassion, and bodhicitta, and we do that through learning the teachings on how to generate love, compassion, and bodhicitta, thinking about those teachings, and then meditating on them. So there is an antidote, there is a path. The Buddha laid it all out, and we're so fortunate to have met those teachings. If people say I have bad breath behind my back, how should I react? Should I get angry? I don't know. Just forget it, I don't think that's such a, Or, use mouthwash or, yeah, but no reason getting angry. There's no reason getting angry. Okay, I found out that in our society, people compare each other to, we compare each other, ourselves to one another, and how to train ourselves to overcome this problem. Okay, it's true, we do compare ourselves a lot to other people, and there's really no benefit in doing it, because we all have our own individual, unique talents and abilities. Yeah, so why should we compare ourselves to other people? And it's, we also don't need to worry about being the best and being number one. We just use our talents in whatever way can be of the greatest benefit to others, and then take delight in doing what we're doing. And then we're peaceful. We don't have to be the best. Anyway, who judges what's best? Nobody really knows. Okay? So use our talents and abilities, develop a kind heart, be satisfied. Okay. So let me see. Okay. I'm just sorting through the questions. Okay, life is like a polluted dump, full of complaints, hatred, comparison, and so forth. How to help society to make the water in the dump pure and clear? I think we all have to practice. To change society, individuals have to change. So I think the best way to do things is to, change ourselves, and through changing ourselves, then in our jobs, whatever job you do, you're able to influence policy or influence your colleagues or your boss, or you help your friends, you help your family. So I think, we have to start with our own internal change, and then whatever work we do in society, express our values and principles through that and try and make good decisions that will influence society in a good way. Okay, so we'll close for this evening. My pile of questions got bigger, but tomorrow we'll get to them. Okay, so let's just sit quietly for a moment. Think about what you heard so you can take it with you. And then let's rejoice that we were able to spend the evening together in this way. And let's dedicate the merit. Imagine the merit as a light at our heart that we send out into the world that brings peace to each and every living being. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their suffering. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore.